It was a Thursday night, one of those rainy evenings that makes the world feel like it's whispering secrets through the raindrops. I remember it so vividly because it was the night everything shifted, when I realized things would never be the same. Laura had left the house earlier in her usual black dress, but this time, something felt off. The air between us had been different for weeks, tight, like a noose. She didn't even bother with her typical half-hearted goodbye. She grabbed her purse, threw her jacket over her shoulder, and casually said, "Don't wait up, it's a late night with the girls." The way she said it was so casual, almost rehearsed. Like she had practiced getting it just right. I didn't say anything, but a knot formed in my SJCAC. Call it instinct, or maybe just the years of knowing someone inside and out. I didn't have any solid proof of anything yet, but I knew something was wrong. Hell, even the sound of her heels tapping down the hallway felt like she was leaving something behind. I sat in the living room, the TV on, but my mind wasn't there. It kept circling back to her, wondering where she really was. At one point, I picked up my phone and texted her, "Have fun tonight." No reply. Hours went by. By midnight, I couldn't sit still anymore. My gut told me to check her location. It's not something I'd ever done before. Trust was something I thought we had, but when I opened the app, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. She wasn't anywhere near where she said she'd be. In fact, she was on the other side of town, parked at some random address I didn't recognize. I stared at the little dot on the map, the seconds dragging like hours. Maybe she had just gone to grab something on her way home. Maybe it was an after-party. My brain scrambled for excuses, trying to make sense of it. But my hands had already started shaking. I couldn't just sit there. I grabbed my keys and jumped into the car. The drive was a blur, headlights, wet streets, and the sinking feeling of dread in my chest. When I finally arrived at the address, it wasn't her friend's place. It was some random apartment building I'd never seen before. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the night was eerily quiet. I parked down the street and just sat there, staring at the building, like it would somehow give me the answers without me having to go inside. And then I saw her. She was walking out of the building, her hair messed up, makeup slightly smudged. It wasn't the look of someone coming home from a night out with friends. She didn't see me at first, but when she turned toward her car, I caught a glimpse of her face, and she was smiling. Not just any smile, but a satisfied one. The kind of smile someone wears when they think they've gotten away with something. My SJCAC dropped. I couldn't sit there any longer. Without thinking, I got out of the car and slammed the door behind me, the sound cutting through the quiet street like a gunshot. Laura turned sharply, her eyes locking with mine for a split second. The smile vanished, replaced by something else, panic. "Jake, what the hell are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice shaking slightly. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rage boiling up inside me. "That's what I should be asking you, Laura. What the hell are you doing here?" She looked around like she was searching for an escape route, but there was none. The game was over, and we both knew it. "Jake, it's not what it looks like," she said, her voice dropping into that familiar, manipulative tone she used whenever she was cornered. But it was what she said next that made my blood boil. "It was just harmless fun, a one-time thing. It doesn't mean anything." I felt my whole body tense up, like her words had punched me in the gut. Harmless fun. A one-time thing. She looked at me like I was supposed to nod, like her betrayal could be brushed off with a few empty words. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, the rain now soaking through my clothes. She stared at me, waiting for me to lose it, expecting me to scream or throw a fit. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, the only thing that came out of my mouth was something I never thought I'd say. "You think a night with another man is just harmless?" She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand to stop her. My voice was calm, but inside I felt like I was about to explode. "You come home tonight, and you'll find our marriage certificate torn up. Understand?" Her eyes widened, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. I turned around, got back in my car, and drove off, leaving her standing there in the rain. That night, I barely slept. The house felt colder, emptier than ever before. Everything was about to change, and I was the only one who saw it coming. The drive home felt like a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and the streetlights blurred into streaks of light and shadow. My mind kept replaying that moment outside the apartment, the look on Laura's face when she realized she'd been caught. That smug confidence crumbled in real time, but what really stuck with me were her words. Harmless fun. That's what she called it. A night with another man, sneaking around behind my back, and she had the nerve to say it was no big deal. As if it hadn't just shattered everything we had built together. By the time I got home, the anger had settled into something colder. I stormed into the house, slamming the door shut behind me. The force rattled the walls. The place looked exactly the same as it had when I left, but it didn't feel the same. It was like walking into a stranger's home. Every photo, every piece of furniture, even the scent of her perfume lingering in the air, it all felt like a lie. I couldn't stand it. I walked straight to the living room shelf and grabbed our wedding photo. In the picture, she's smiling at me, like I was the only person in the world. Her eyes bright with what I thought was love. My SJCAC twisted at the sight of it. Without thinking, the frame slipped from my fingers and hit the floor, the glass shattering into jagged pieces, just like everything else. But I wasn't done. I stormed into the study, yanked open the drawer where we kept our important documents, and there it was, our marriage certificate. The official paper that used to mean something. It used to symbolize a promise, a commitment. Now, it was just a reminder of how far we'd fallen. My hands trembled with anger, and before I knew it, I ripped the certificate straight down the middle. The sound of paper tearing was so satisfying and so final. I kept going, tearing it into smaller and smaller pieces until it was nothing but confetti scattered across the floor. The house was eerily silent, except for my heavy breathing. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the shredded certificate at my feet, my mind racing but blank at the same time. She didn't deserve that piece of paper. She didn't deserve the promises we made or the life we built together. And if she thought she could just walk back in here and act like this was some silly misunderstanding, she was in for a rude awakening. I paced around the living room, running my hands through my hair, trying to calm the storm in my head. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. How long had this been going on? Was this really just a one-time thing, or had she been sneaking around for months, maybe even years? Every late night, every work trip, every text she dismissed as, just the girls, all of it felt tainted now. By 3 a.m., I had lost count of how many times I replayed the night in my head. I kept expecting to wake up, hoping this was some sick nightmare. But it wasn't. And the worst part? I didn't even know if I wanted to confront her again. Not yet. I needed more. I reached for her laptop, sitting open on the kitchen counter. She usually kept it locked, but tonight, of all nights, she had left it wide open, like she didn't expect me to notice, like she had gotten too comfortable in her lies. My hands hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for a split second. I had never invaded her privacy before, not once. But the Laura I thought I knew had shattered everything. The messages were easy to find. Too easy. Her browser was still open to her email, and there it was, his name. Ryan. A string of messages, casual at first, then flirty, then as I scrolled down, more explicit. Every word felt like a punch to the gut. But it didn't stop there. There were photos, too. Photos of them together, laughing in a way I hadn't seen her laugh in years. Then one of her in that same black dress she had worn tonight, standing outside some bar, leaning into him like he was the center of her universe. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest tightening. It was one thing to suspect, but to see it laid out in front of me like that? It was a different kind of pain. A kind that crawls under your skin and festers. Just as I sat there, staring at the closed laptop, I heard the front door creak open. Laura was home. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor, echoing through the silence. She didn't know yet. She had no idea what she was walking into. I didn't move, just sat there, waiting for her to come face to face with the wreckage she'd caused. When she stepped into the living room and saw me sitting there, her eyes went wide. But it wasn't guilt or shame that I saw. It was that same mask of control she always wore, like she could talk her way out of anything. She didn't notice the shredded marriage certificate at first, not until she stepped on one of the torn pieces. Her gaze followed the trail of paper, and then her eyes met mine. I waited for her to say something, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, anything. But instead, she crossed her arms and, with that same calm, icy tone, she said, "What's your problem, Jake?" My problem. It took everything in me not to explode right there. Her voice, so casual, so cold, was the final spark. The one that lit the whole damn thing on fire. Her words echoed in the room, "What's your problem, Jake?" I couldn't believe it. She was standing there, looking at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, but the rage was bubbling just under the surface. My problem? I repeated slowly, standing up from the chair. You really want to know what my problem is, Laura? She tilted her head slightly, still acting like she had control of the situation. Yeah, I do. You've been acting like a lunatic lately. What's going on? I could feel my fists clenching at my sides, but I wasn't going to let her get the satisfaction of seeing me lose it. Not yet. What's going on? I said, stepping closer. I'll tell you what's going on. You've been lying to me. Sneaking around behind my back. You think I didn't notice? You think I didn't figure it out? Her expression barely changed. She was too good at this. Too practiced. Jake, you're overreacting. I told you, it was just a night out with the girls. Don't. I snapped, my voice finally breaking through the calm I had been trying to hold on to. Don't you dare lie to me again, Laura. I followed you. I saw where you went. You weren't with the girls. You were with him. With Ryan. That finally got a reaction. For a split second, her eyes widened, just a flicker of fear, but it vanished just as quickly as it appeared. She crossed her arms again and let out a sigh, like she was annoyed. Okay, fine. So you followed me. Big deal. What are you going to do, Jake? You want to have a big fight about this? Yell and scream? Go ahead. Get it out of your system. I stood there, stunned by how cold she was. It wasn't the guilt or regret I had expected. It was something else. It was like she had already made up her mind that none of this Ryanered. Is that it? I asked quietly. You just don't care anymore. You think you can do whatever you want, and I'm supposed to just roll over and take it? She shrugged. What do you want me to say, Jake? I'm sorry. Fine. I'm sorry. But let's be real here, you haven't exactly been the perfect husband. That hit me like a slap to the face. I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around what she had just said. Are you seriously trying to put this on me? She didn't flinch. I'm not saying it's all your fault. But maybe if you hadn't been so distant, so checked out of this marriage, I wouldn't have had to find someone else. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything she had done, after all the lies and the betrayal, she had the nerve to make me the villain in her story. You're unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head. I gave you everything, Laura. I worked my ass off to build this life for us, and this is how you repay me? By running around with some other guy? She sighed again, like she was bored with the conversation. Look, I don't want to do this right now. I'm tired, and I don't have the energy for your drama. Can we just talk about this in the morning? The rage flared up inside me again, but I kept it in check. No, we're not talking about this in the morning. We're talking about it now. She rolled her eyes. Fine. What do you want, Jake? You want me to grovel? Beg for forgiveness? Cry and tell you I'll never do it again? I took a step closer, my voice low and cold. No, Laura. I want you to leave. That caught her off guard. What? I want you to pack your things and leave, I repeated, my voice steady. Tonight. She blinked, clearly not expecting that. You're serious? You're kicking me out? Yeah, I said, locking eyes with her. I'm done. You made your choice, and now you can live with it. She stood there for a moment, stunned, as if she couldn't believe I was actually serious. Then, her face hardened. Fine. If that's how you want to play it, Jake, I'll leave. But don't think for a second that this is over. You're going to regret this. I didn't respond. I just watched as she turned and stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I could hear her angrily throwing things into a suitcase, muttering under her breath. But I didn't care. Not anymore. When she finally walked out of the house, dragging her suitcase behind her, she didn't say a word. She didn't even look at me. She just slammed the door, and the silence that followed was deafening. I stood there in the empty house, the broken pieces of our life scattered around me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace.